I was scheduled to do this presentation last week, but there was an unprecedented power failure in San Diego. That's why I couldn't do it. The topic is how India's genius tradition was lost. And it got lost right at the beginning itself. It's paradoxical somewhat. The Maharishi, who is the founder of the Transcendental Meditation, who brought meditation to the United States and to the entire world, used to quote often a Rig Vedic statement in which he pointed out that how the knowledge tradition or the wisdom tradition was lost in the Vedas itself by quoting this oft-quoted Rig, which is Richo Akshare Parame Vyoman Yasmin Deva Adi Vishve Nishedu Yastanna Veda Kim Richa Karishyati. Yastanna Veda Kim Richa Karishyati. That's very important. Veda has lost its wisdom tradition even during the Rig Vedic period. People did not know where the secret of the riches are residing. What is the role of the aksharas? What's the role of the devatas, and how the devatas are not only outside but also inside within the brain. And if you do not understand any of this, and how are you going to benefit from this wisdom tradition? What is the use of the Kimricha Karishyati? That's the question even the Rig Vedic priest asks. There is a dire need to revive that, and then it is not an easy job, but it can be done. And down even after the Rig Vedic period, there are a lot of things happened. The Vedic tradition got divided into the Brahmanas on the one side and the Aranyakas on the other side. The Brahmanas are ritualistic tradition. And then again, the rituals were considered not so important by the Aranyaka people who were responsible for the Upanishads and then later on for Buddhism, because that's an intellectual tradition. And the Brahmanas are more practical. They are more representative of the Vedas. And even there, people did not understand the purpose of the chants. And then the Aranyakas and the Upanishads somewhat tried to, highlight the wisdom behind the what later came to be called Hinduism. And now we have come to a point, there are no scholars, who are both a mystic as well as an academician or a scientist. So the schools and colleges have people who have superficial knowledge, and they are nowhere in comparison with Yoga Vasishta or Vishwamitra or Agastya or the Vedic rishis, who not only learned everything well, but also got the maximum benefit out of it by developing siddhi powers and we don't have any one of them living in current time. On the other hand, with the priestly tradition, the Brahmanical tradition, no, there are priests who are not trained in the intellectual tradition or in the mystical tradition. So that's how the association of the wisdom tradition with the practice of religion was lost. And there are other reasons. There is foreign invasion by outsiders, the Muslim invasion, and then later on the British, and Hinduism lost the favor, the patronage of kings. Once you have the patronage lost, then everything is lost. And the worst thing that happened was science came to be juxtaposed against religion, and religion came to be considered as superstition. There are elements of superstition, but that is not superstition per se, but the inability of the people to understand and interpret religion beyond the superficial interpretation, which unfortunately leads to superstitious understanding. And the time is right now for the revival or renaissance of the wisdom tradition, but it is going to be done in a totally different way. And it was started by the Maharishi, but then he stayed away from the mainline scientists, creating an identity of his own, which is necessary at this point of time. Now it should be that right time now. It is the right time now that India should take steps to revive the tradition, not simply as it was understood even during Vedic times or the Upanishadic period, but in a totally different perspective. And that would be something like, when I was a doctoral student, one of my doctoral committee members was a specialist in Japan. And he told me, Japan never westernized, but modernized. And he pointed out to me in one of our discussions that in India, westernization became out of proportion. To be identified with Western culture, tradition, knowledge, everything superseded the ancient religious, cultural wisdom traditions, which is true. Because though the people who abandoned their religions are urban people who are living in urban places, who are more educated, but there was no education of the Vedas or Upanishads. So that has to be corrected. And then how it can be corrected, not that we can de-Westernize this Indian culture, and there is no need to it. What has to happen is side by side, we should have uh, westernization, modernization, along with the traditional wisdom. And the Hinduism offers an excellent candidate for modernization as well as westernization. Modernization is more like on science and technology. There is tremendous amount of um, potential to uh, uh, be brought to light, potential wisdom to be brought to light to the scientists, to the technologists. Now, AI and Sanskrit studies are picking up. NASA is interested in Harvard and MIT are studying, but not as much studies in India. That's very unfortunate. It's not only in one field, but in every field, the Vedic tradition can contribute to develop the super science, the super technology for the 21st century and thereafter. Because the wisdom there has not been even 1 or 2% exposed anywhere. It remains either as philosophy or tradition and taught by people who are not trained in science. So the scientists should get involved in it. I can go on and on and talk about the politics of it within India, which has played a very devastating role. When I was in India, I found that there was a particular Siddha medicine preparation for coronavirus, Kabasura Kudinir. And I was reading in the newspapers that the other states were not allowed to use it because of regional politics. And this has to come to an end. People have to have a national pride of knowledge wherever it's available, because India is a subcontinent with different cultures, different languages. But then all of them have one thing in common. The wisdom tradition has been preserved in every vernacular literature, intact and improved upon by scholars and scientists who came thereafter. And that has to happen. Now, I will be more focused on this presentation, which is how we can revive this tradition. And I have been involved in it for the past 20 years of research, how the aksharas, which are alphabets or phonemes, can impact the brain and activate certain centers of the brain to bring maximum out of those regions' functionalities known to us. So our brain, we are not able to get the maximum out of the brain because of our uh, inability to understand the brain per se. And neuroscience is only a very recent development in Western science. But the rishis knew about that. They asked questions that nobody asked. Which comes first, thought or the word? Where is the meaning hidden? The Spota theory, which is a very important theory which has not been studied. But my own interest has been over the past 20 years to go and activate regions of the brain with phonemes, and that's knowledge derived from my study of the Vedas and my study of the Upanishads, and then later on with Agamas and the Tantras, because they pinpoint very clearly the intelligence is located, all kinds of intelligence, not just one intelligence, general intelligence, and then there's math intelligence, there is linguistic intelligence, there is every different kind of intelligence is located in a certain part of the brain, and it can be activated through phonemes. And I was able to do research. Fortunately, I had financial resources so that I could do it independently with the Brain Science International, and then later on with the Harvard scientists at Harvard. When I told them that a sound like ah is going to produce signatures when you listen to them, because I studied listening versus vocalizing or both together, all kinds of tests were done. The first study was with Brain Science International. And the founder, I was talking to him, he said, I'm not convinced if it's going to have any significant impact, because if you hear, maybe you can go and then see some temporal lobe activation. But he never expected that the anterior cingulate will have a response, a very dominant response. The anterior cingulate is a brain which carries the von Economo neuron, which is a very specialized neuron, which is found in animals like monkeys, elephants. These are all, animals in Hinduism, very sacred animals, with associated with a very high level of intelligence. Dolphins also. And the human beings have, all human beings have that von Economo neuron in the anterior cingulate area. And these neurons are involved in so many key activities. Like one of the important one is error detection. It's a mechanism. If you go and do something wrong, the anterior cingulate will caution you. This is called error detection. Oh, you're eating ice cream. It's not good for you. Or you're smoking. It's not good for you. Okay. And he found a dominant signature at this part of the brain, an alpha spindle. And he supported it. And that led me to take it to a better institution, a higher institution like Harvard, where I did a more scientific study, using fMRI, functional MRI. And there again, and this is the response of sound ah. Now let me tell you, before I go into that, what is ah? Ah sound in the Bhagavad Gita, for instance. Let me go to the Rig Veda first. Richo Akshare. The Akshara is indestructible, and it all started with the sound ah. That's why the Rig Veda first verse also starts with Agni ah. So the ah is wisdom. If you want supernormal intelligence, it's with the sound ah. And there's so much literature on ah that has to be researched on. So based on the research with the Brain Science International, I explained to the Harvard scientists, ah will have signature, very dominant signature. And I even pointed out it is going to be in, say, cerebellum. And then they could not accept it because from whatever we know about science, it's not going to work. But I'm interested in the topic, but we have done some previous research and there is some scope, but I'm skeptical. Okay, I have no problem with that, just go. And then what happened was, fMRI can find, quick results because the response comes in seconds from the brain. So, it was in my voice, the voice was ah, ah. Here it goes. The entire brain responds to the sound ah. Entire brain, which they technically call as global activation of the brain. Now, I will give you the parallel from religion, from Hinduism. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, in the Aksharas, I am ah. There you go. He is the best of everything, the best of the seasons, Vasant Rutu. And among the Akshara sounds, I am ah, because it is omniscience. So if you want omniscience, you don't have to go anywhere. It's so simple, it's available. You can awe all the time. And you will have the response. Now, other syllables also have their own signatures at different other parts of the brain. And before I forget, and Shiva also says that he saw. And the Buddha also says he saw. And not only that, even in the My Lord's Prayer in Aramaic, Abun. It starts with Abun. If you go not to the English translation of the Bible, but to the Aramaic, then Aramaic, which is the language that was spoken by Jesus, Abun, the prayer starts with that, Abun. And there you can see the sound ah and u. And then the ending with the N, they all are very significant. So based on the research, I developed what is called the sound. phonemic intelligence as a science, which still I have to work a lot, but then whatever I have done is enough to prove that you can create a wisdom brain with this phonemic intelligence. So since I was more concerned about the underprivileged people through my foundation and Tripura Foundation in the US and in India, I put up school, centers, nonprofit centers, and introduced them. And then some children even went to medical schools and engineering schools, or state first. These are people coming from poor communities. And then later on, thanks to the past chief minister of Goa, he introduced it to the entire school. And we still continue it there after he passed away with the new chief minister. And then we have data from there, how you can go and activate even the math brain, and studies show that people improve their math brain. Because here in the West, particularly in America, we know what the math brain is. It is the intraparietal cells. Previously, we were thinking it is somewhere in the parietal lobe, and then the angular gyrus. And now recent research say that they went and paralyzed the intraparietal cells, and then saw that people developed what is called dyscalculia. There is immense potential, and I have not touched Hinduism at all, because it's a very vast, repository of every science out there, whether it is nuclear science, yes. Whether it is like quantum physics, the latest one, which is like the string field theory, not the string theory, string field theory, which is the latest one, which says that the sounds are the building blocks of the universe, of language, of intelligence. So the epitome of this is the finding that intelligence is in the sounds. Energy is in the sounds. Matter can be manipulated through the sounds. Is the discovery of the Hindu science of mantras. And I will go on and talk more and more about it. And the challenge will be to bring these two together. And enormous resources are needed. And I'm not worried about it. I will do my job. And my job is going to be to introduce this to not only to students, but to adults. Because when I introduced it to poor people, one public school, one private school said, we like this, but then you are introducing this only in government schools and poor schools, and our parents won't like it. There is, so we cannot teach this. That's why I told them, look, I'm creating this genius program. Now you can tell your students, so the rich parents would be interested in that. Not that I'm going to abandon government schools, we are going to do that. we are doing it anyway. So the Genius program is for everyone because everybody has the potential to do it, because when a child is born, it has 100 billion neurons. And then we have to monitor the pruning process, and there is immense potential for this phonemic intelligence program, especially going forward to create a new civilization. It is important. It has to be based not on the development of just the neocortex. The neocortex is very important. That's what has given us science and technology. But beyond the neocortex is the cerebellum area, where I just told the scientist it is the key area, cerebellum. And it has the most neurons, packed within the brain, although it's a very small area compared to the neocortex. And that's where we can activate certain key areas like the cerebellum. You can produce a lot of Einsteins in different areas, not just only in physics. And that I have a very ambitious, desire to get this out to schools. I've been living in the United States for nearly 4 decades. And during this time, I've watched what's going on in the school systems, even in the country, wealthiest country, scientific country, technologically advanced country, superpower, etc. The educational system has not introduced the intelligence as a study, because there is, this is an enigma to me, why it has not happened, and it's still not happening. So I want to throw this out, opportunity. What I'm going to do is create an opt-in page, but I'm not going to give it to people who kind of not committed to it. I'm going to create a Genius program. It will go through steps and prove that you can make your children genius. You can yourself become genius, provided you activate the different parts of the brain. And we have developed graded lessons for doing that, which involve a study of some practical neuroscience along with a small practice, which needs a few minutes of practice. So this is the time that I'm very committed to India, because I'm 72 years old now. I have always wanted to do something to India. When I first came, when I went to India 20 years ago back, when I just said that we are going to do it in schools, nobody wanted it. And people were not even willing. At that time, Vajpayee, I think Vajpayee was the chief minister, prime minister. And he called a conference of the educational ministers from all the states. And there was a prayer. And the education ministers walked out because you are trying to bring in prayer. My God. Because that reminds me of what happened here 2 weeks ago, when Donald Trump, before he is going out, he wanted to introduce prayer in schools. You do not know the power of prayer. And within the Hindu tradition, wisdom, prayer, science, God experience are all together 200%. So there will be an opt-in page. I have asked people to develop it. Maybe it will be ready in a few days, and I will catch up with things that I wanted to say to you in the next Thursday. God bless.